For 26 years, my mother told everyone she saved me. Then on my birthday, in the middle of a packed restaurant, she leaned across the table, smiled, and said the 6 words that rewrote my entire life. "We only adopted you for the tax benefits." People around us were laughing, clinking glasses, celebrating a Friday night. No one knew my world had just split open. My father didn't even look at me. He just stared at the table like he'd been waiting for this moment. But here's the part my mother didn't know. I had been preparing for this conversation for 8 months, and the 3 people sitting quietly at a table behind her, they weren't strangers. They were my real family. So instead of crying, I reached into my bag and pulled out an envelope, and suddenly, the entire restaurant went silent. My name is Emma Carter. I'm 26, and until 8 months ago, I believed the story my parents told everyone in our town, that they rescued me. We lived in a quiet Ohio town where everybody knew each other's birthdays, church seats, and family business. My mother, Diane Carter, loved telling the story of how she and my father adopted a poor, unwanted baby and gave her a real life. That baby was me. Growing up, I tried very hard to be the daughter she described. I studied constantly and graduated near the top of my class. While most of my friends left for big universities, I stayed close to home and attended community college so I wouldn't be a burden. I worked evenings at a grocery store, then later trained as a nurse assistant at the county clinic. By 23, I was working full-time. I paid rent to my parents for the small, converted garage behind their house. $400 a month. My mother called it teaching responsibility. I believed her. I helped them whenever they asked. I drove my father to doctor appointments when his back started acting up. I cleaned their kitchen on weekends. Every Sunday night, I sat at their dinner table, listening to my mother tell neighbors how lucky I was. "You know," she'd say proudly, "Emma would have had nothing if we hadn't taken her in." Everyone would nod, and every time, I would smile politely and say, "Thank you," because I thought gratitude was what good daughters were supposed to give. But looking back now, there was always something strange about my childhood. There were no baby photos of me. Whenever I asked about the day I was born, my mother would wave the question away. "Those things don't matter," she'd say, and my father would suddenly find something very interesting to look at on the floor. For 26 years, I believed their version of my life, until the night I opened a folder in our basement that was never meant for me to see. And everything I thought I knew about my family began to fall apart. The night I found the folder wasn't dramatic. No thunder, no shouting, no life-changing music in the background. Just a dusty basement and a cardboard box that shouldn't have mattered. My mother had left a note on my apartment door earlier that week. "Clean the basement this weekend. Your cousin Jenna is moving back and we need space." That was how Diane Carter asked for favors, never as a request, always as an instruction. So Saturday afternoon, I was down there moving boxes, Christmas decorations, old fishing gear, a broken lamp that had probably been broken for 10 years. Then I found a sealed storage box tucked behind the water heater. My mother's name was written across the top in black marker. I shouldn't have opened it, but I did. Inside was a single manila folder, and inside that folder was the first crack in the story I had believed my whole life. At the top of the stack was an official adoption certificate. That didn't shock me. I already knew I was adopted, but beneath it was something I had never seen before. My original birth certificate. The name in the center didn't say Emma Carter. It said Baby Girl Bennett. I remember staring at it for a long time, trying to process why my mother had hidden it. Then I saw the third document, a receipt from a tax consultant. One line highlighted in yellow, adoption, tax credit, $5,200. The date was the same year I was adopted. I sat on that basement floor for almost an hour, not crying, just thinking, because suddenly dozens of memories started rearranging themselves. The way my mother always reminded me how expensive it was to raise me. The way she controlled every financial decision I made. She insisted my paycheck be deposited into a joint account when I was younger. She kept my Social Security card locked in a filing cabinet. Whenever I talked about moving to another city, she'd say the same thing. "You wouldn't survive without us." And when I finally moved into the garage apartment behind their house, she made sure the rent was just low enough that leaving would feel impossible. $400 a month, cheap enough to keep me close, expensive enough to remind me I owed them. For 26 years, my mother told the world she saved me. But sitting on that cold concrete floor with those documents in my hands, I started wondering if I had ever been her daughter at all, or if I had just been an investment. For a few days after finding the folder, I told myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe the tax document was just paperwork. Maybe my parents had meant well. Maybe I was reading too much into it. But once doubt enters your mind, it changes the way you see everything. I started noticing things I had ignored for years. The way my mother would say, "After everything we've done for you," whenever I disagreed with her. The way she corrected people if they called me her daughter. "She's adopted," Diane would say quickly, almost proudly. At the time, I thought she was just being honest. Now it felt like something else. A reminder, a label, a line she never wanted anyone to forget. 3 weeks after I found the folder, the real betrayal revealed itself. I came home from work one evening and found my mother in the kitchen with a neighbor, Karen, from the post office. They didn't hear me come in. Karen was laughing softly. "I still can't believe how lucky you were with that adoption," she said. "Kids are expensive." My mother laughed. Not the polite laugh she used at church, the real one. "Oh, please," she said. The tax credit alone covered most of the first few years. Both women laughed again. Then my mother added something that made my stomach drop. "And honestly, Emma's been useful ever since. She pays rent, helps around the house." It worked out perfectly. I stood there in the hallway, completely still, because in that moment, the quiet suspicion I had been carrying for weeks finally turned into certainty. They didn't see me as their daughter. Not really. To Diane Carter, I wasn't family. I was a long-term investment that had finally started paying off. After that conversation in the kitchen, something inside me changed. I stopped seeing my parents as the people who raised me, and started seeing them as the people who had been managing me. For weeks, I said nothing. I kept going to work at the clinic. I kept paying rent for the garage apartment. I kept showing up for Sunday dinners. But now every moment felt different. Every favor had a price attached to it. And then, one night, the price doubled. I came home from work and found a typed note taped to my door. No greeting, no explanation, just one paragraph. "Effective next month. Rent for the garage apartment will increase from $400 to $900 per month. If this arrangement is not acceptable, you will have 30 days to vacate." Signed at the bottom, Diane Carter. I read the paper 3 times. $900. My entire paycheck from the clinic barely covered my student loans, groceries, and gas. 900 wasn't rent. It was eviction disguised as a number. I walked across the yard to the main house. My father was sitting at the kitchen table drinking coffee. "Did you see the note?" I asked. He didn't look up. "Your mother has her reasons. Reasons for what I said quietly, for pushing me out." He stirred his coffee slowly. "Your cousin needs a place to stay for a while," he said, "and I don't." My father's spoon clinked against the mug. He never answered. I stood there for another 10 seconds. Then I turned around and walked back to my apartment. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed with my laptop open, staring at apartment listings in other towns. 600, 700, 800, all of them out of reach. By midnight, the truth was impossible to ignore. If I lost the apartment, I would lose everything at once. Housing, health insurance, stability. I was 26 years old, working full-time, and still one decision away from being homeless. And the worst part wasn't the fear. It was the realization that my mother knew that. She knew exactly how trapped I was, and she had decided to tighten the trap anyway. For the first time in my life, I understood something clearly. This wasn't love, it was control. For 2 weeks after the rent notice, I barely slept. Every night I lay awake, staring at the ceiling of the garage apartment, doing the same math over and over again. $900 for rent, $300 for insurance if my parents removed me from their plan. Student loans, the numbers never worked. But something else kept bothering me. That birth certificate, baby girl Bennett. The name refused to leave my mind. One night, after another hour of pointless apartment searching, I opened my laptop and typed it into a search bar. At first, nothing useful appeared. Then, a public records result caught my eye. Laura Bennett, registered nurse, Ridgemont County Health Center, age 48. Ridgemont was only 2 hours away. I stared at the screen for a long time. My hands were shaking so badly, I had to type the email 3 times before I finished it. Finally, I wrote just 3 sentences. "Hello, My name is Emma Carter. I believe you might be my biological mother. I'm not angry. I just want to understand what happened. I stared at the message for almost 10 minutes before pressing send. Then I closed the laptop and tried to forget about it. 4 hours later, my phone buzzed. One new email from Laura Bennett. My heart was pounding so loudly I could barely hear my own breathing as I opened it. The message was only one sentence, but it changed everything. Emma, I have been waiting for you to find me for 26 years. Part 7. Revenge Justice is approximately equal to 530 words. For the next 3 months, I lived a double life. In my parents' house, nothing changed. I still paid rent for the garage apartment. I still showed up for Sunday dinner. I still said thanks, Mom, when Diane passed the potatoes across the table. But every few weeks, on my days off, I drove 2 hours east to Ridgemont. That's where I met Laura Bennett for the first time. She opened the door before I even knocked. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Then she whispered my name like she had practiced it 1,000 times. Her hands were shaking so badly, she had to grip the doorframe to steady herself. Behind her stood a tall man with gray at his temples. My husband? Daniel, she said softly. He stepped forward and shook my hand like I already belonged there. Welcome, he said. No speech, no explanation, just one word that somehow meant everything. Over the next few visits, Laura told me the story my adoptive parents never had. When she was 22, she got pregnant during nursing school. Her parents were furious. They told her she would ruin her future, lose her career, disgrace the family. By the time I was born, they had already arranged the adoption. They said it was temporary, Laura told me quietly. They said I could find you again when my life was stable. But by the time she realized the paperwork was permanent, it was too late. For 26 years, she had searched quietly. She lit a candle every March 15th, my birthday, and waited. But the real turning point didn't come from Laura. It came from a lawyer. 2 weeks before my birthday, Laura asked if I would meet someone with her. His office was small and crowded with legal books. Emma, the man said, shaking my hand. My name is Michael Bennett. He was Laura's uncle, a family attorney. He opened a thin file on his desk. I've been waiting to give this to you, he said. Inside were documents from my biological grandmother. She had died 6 years earlier, and before she passed, she created a trust fund in my name. Not enormous, but enough to change my life. There was one condition, Michael said. The trust could only be released once you found your biological family on your own. I stared at him, stunned. How much, I asked quietly. He told me the number. It was enough for a small apartment, enough for insurance, enough for independence, enough to make sure Diane Carter never had financial control over me again. But Michael slid one more document across the desk, a copy of the original adoption agreement, and highlighted in yellow were the financial benefits my adoptive parents had received. Tax credits, state subsidies, medical reimbursements. For years, they profited from the adoption, Michael said carefully. Legally, that's not unusual. But the way they used it against you, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. That was the moment I made my decision. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to beg. And I wasn't going to disappear quietly. Instead, I waited for 8 months, until my 26th birthday dinner, until the restaurant was full, until my adoptive parents said the quiet part out loud. Because revenge doesn't always look like anger. Sometimes it looks like letting the truth walk into the room and watching it destroy the lie. And on that Friday night at Maggie's restaurant, I was finally ready. Because the envelope in my bag didn't just contain DNA results, it contained the truth my mother had spent 26 years hiding. And this time, everyone was going to hear it. Part 8. Healing ending is approximately equal to 260 words. The morning after the dinner at Maggie's, I packed everything I owned into 4 cardboard boxes. 7 years in that garage apartment. My entire life fit into the back seat of my car. Clothes, a few books, my nursing certification, and the envelope that had finally set me free. I didn't go into the main house. There was nothing left to say. Instead, I left the key on the kitchen counter beside the eviction notice Diane had printed for me. Under my signature, I wrote one line, "You don't need 30 days. I'm leaving today." Then I drove east. 2 hours later, when the sign for Ridgemont appeared on the highway, I pulled over to the side of the road And for the first time since that birthday dinner, I cried. Not because I had lost a family, but because I had finally found one. 6 months later, I moved into my own small apartment in Ridgemont. It isn't fancy, but every bill is in my name. Every document belongs to me. Every decision is mine. On my wrist, I wear a thin silver bracelet. Hanging from it is a tiny, faded hospital band Laura saved for 26 years. Baby girl Bennett. Every year on March 15th, we light a candle together on her kitchen windowsill. For the years we lost, and for the years we still have, because I spent most of my life being someone's obligation. Now, for the first time ever, I'm simply someone's daughter. If you had been in my place, would you have forgiven them?